So today is All Souls Day, and oftentimes in the Protestant tradition, we sort of collapse All Saints and All Souls Day. Is it okay? Okay, great. We collapse All Saints and All Souls Day, but our Catholic siblings are onto something, I think, in that they spread out the observation of these two things, All Saints and All Souls, because they are a little bit different, but they carry with them a marking of this time of year that we started celebrating with Halloween. How many had trick-or-treaters? Yep. What was the best costume you saw this year? What, Winnie the Pooh? Okay, that's amazing, adorable. The inflatable chicken, incredible. 3-month-old nephew's a pumpkin, hard to beat, right? Baby pumpkin's the best, right? What else? A homemade robot, so like really creative. That's awesome. So do we know where this tradition came from? To go around and knock on doors and ask for candy, and why it's sort of seen as like a spooky kind of like part of the year? Hershey's. It's a ploy to sell more chocolate. Cindy? Vague knowledge. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah, so one version is that people would dress in costumes to hide from the souls that were maybe still wandering and haunting. That if you knew you were doing something that was going to piss your grandma off, that you sort of tried to have some soul camouflage, right? That's one version. So in pre-Christian tradition, we also know multiple parts of the world view this time of year as where the veil is thinnest. So often, so what that means is that it is the easiest time to be in touch with the spirits of those who have passed on. So this is present in the Christian tradition, but it is, Herima's nodding, so like, what are the traditions that you're familiar with? Yes, our Latina siblings have ofrendas, right, where they feed the spirits of those who are visiting and making hospitality and welcome for people. So there's these beautiful installations for Dia de los Muertos, which is part of this, but was an indigenous practice in Central and South America before it kind of had a Catholic overlay on top of it. Same in the Celtic tradition. We have Samhain, which is again a time when the veil was the most thin, where connection with ancestors and setting out an ancestral plate was a common practice before Catholicism came in. So this is partly a Christian tradition, partly a pre-Christian indigenous tradition that we've sort of folded into as we recognize that this time of year is really sacred for remembering those people who came before. In fact, one other sort of root of the tradition of costuming for Halloween is this idea that if the veil was thin and we dressed like ghosts or specters, that those who are on the other side would talk to us more easily because we were sort of all dressed for the same party. Basically, there wouldn't be so much of a stark difference between them and us. So if we, had the sheet with the holes in the eye for eyes, like the classic ghost costume, that it would make it easier to communicate with our loved ones from beyond. So All Souls Day is today. And what this is a time where we remember those who have passed on, usually in the last year. those we are still actively missing and grieving, those people whose absence we feel so keenly. And so there's a tradition within Christianity that we say the names of those people in our community that we have lost during this time, which we will do a little bit later. And then All Saints' Day was yesterday, so this is where we were supposed to start, right? And this is the time where we really think about those heroes of faith, those mentors that we had that really, really did pour into us and made us who we are. So this is not necessarily who we are actively grieving, but those people that we want to call on their strength to help us through whatever this moment is. A time when we think about our ancestors, whether those are biological or not, and ask for their wisdom. Not necessarily in a prayer practice, but just thinking about what would my grandmother, who survived 100 years ago, have to say about this moment? How did she make it through the difficulties that she faced, and what could I learn from her? What of her do I still carry with me? And it isn't necessarily only a biological lineage, although it tends to be, but this could also be teachers and professors, other pastors, mentors, friends, neighbors, whoever it is who really you learned how to be you in relationship with. And this is especially important in church. We don't have it quite so much in this church building, but in many church buildings, you'll look under pretty much anything, and you'll see what? In memoriam, a plaque, right? This is there's one that was on our old piano that's currently sitting in the sound booth, right? Yeah, we have some, but it's the Bill Smith Memorial Thermostat, right? And we do this partially because it was, sometimes there was monies that were donated in that person's honor, so that we want to honor, that it was a gift in their memory. But what it does is it keeps names alive. And this is important. Our Jewish siblings say that people die twice. When their heart stops beating, and then when we say their name for the last time. A bronze plaque beneath something in a church is a way of continuing to say someone's name, to honor the fact that we are who we are because they were who they were. That they still have an impact on who we are and what we do and how we have set up our community and what it is that we understand that we are here to do. Those names can be really important. In fact, as my advice to new pastors has been, take a look at whose names are underneath those plaques or on those plaques and ask for those stories. You hear a lot about the history of the church. We have the Bob Howard Memorial Garden downstairs, and I didn't get the chance to meet Bob Howard, but some folks in this room did. And he is one of the reasons that we have such a spirit of welcome here, because he would roll around with a small notebook, take notes on visitors, and then if they came back, and when they came back, would ask, oh, hey, you told me about this thing a couple weeks ago, and I wrote it down. I want to follow up with you. How did it go? How was that? You may not know Bob Howard, but you know the welcome and spirit that is in this church because he helped cultivate it. And that is only one such story. There are so many more. So we take this time both to name our grief that is still too raw to start to make meaning of in that way, but also to name that we are who we are because they have been. So we have a slide. Where we will take a moment to name those people in our church family specifically who have passed in the last year. I know that this is not the only loss that has faced our broader community. So once we name those names and keep a moment of silence for each of them, I will invite you, if you have lost someone in the last year, to name them, and we will keep silence with you. Our first loss this year on New Year's Day, Denise Lee. At the end of each moment of silence, I will invite you to say, "We are because you were. We are because you were." Our second loss this year, Bree Stuyvesant. We are because you were. Our third loss this year, Jerry Moore. We are because you were. And then just yesterday, just before noon, we have someone who is a little bit of both, who is part of the DNA of this church, helped found it, and who we are still reeling from her loss less than 24 hours ago. Our fourth loss this year, Reverend Faye Gallegos. We are because you were. If there are those people who have passed in the last year that you would like to say their names, and leave some time and space for you to name them.
We lost a cousin. His name was Wilson Ruiz, a very spiritual, faithful man who raised 4 of his own children and one, my cousin's first son. A very, very loving father who wanted to show the world that even though he did not have a father figure in his life, God showed him how to be a good father. He will always be remembered. Thank you.
We are because
As
you.
you were.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi,
Hi.
Stephanie,
hi, hi. Thanks for letting me join. One of my very good friends, his name is Thad Blizzard, like the storm, uh, passed away suddenly in August, and same age as me. And he was just a dear, genuine person. Thank you.
Absolutely. For Thad. We are because you were. Carolyn, go ahead.
um, my cousin Bill Davenport passed away about 2 weeks ago. And he was like a brother to me, and I miss him greatly. So I just wanted to name Bill.
Absolutely. Keep a moment of silence for Bill. We are because you were. Bob, you're still muted.
Supposed to be unmuted. My sister Barbara Kinsey Sable passed away early this spring. She was 94 years old, and she sort of mentored me through my growing up.
Keep a moment of silence for Barbara. We are because you were. Yeah, I saw. Would you pull up the chat? The chat? Steven Sanchez, son of my Joe's buddy, Steve Sanchez, just on October 20th. We'll keep a moment of silence for Steven. We are because you were.
Whoops, overstepped. My Auntie Eileen, who died 3 weeks ago, she was 96. She was the last surviving member of that generation, and she was my favorite fun aunt, and I miss her greatly.
Is it Eileen? Eileen. For Eileen, we are because you were.
my sister-in-law, Patsy Crago, Dave's sister, my father, Lauren Abbott, his brother, Robert Abbott, and another brother, Dean Abbott.
Keep a moment of silence for all of the loss in your family this year. For Patsy and Warren and Bob and Dean, we are because you were.
Nora Rowland is my sister's mother-in-law, who passed away this past spring in the same location in their home as her daughter had passed away 3 years ago, so almost to the date. Nora Rowland. And Felicia Hernandez is the daughter of my coworker and good friend Terry Hernandez. Her only daughter. She was in her 30s. I taught both of Terry's grandsons, and they were devastated by the loss of Aunt Fifi. So. For Nora and Felicia, we are because you were. Traditionally speaking, this service is always a communion service, which also has pre-Christian roots. In the Celtic tradition, they practice what's called a dumb feast. Dumb meaning not able to speak. So a quiet meal where you set a plate for the person that you are drawing on their wisdom, acting as if they sit next to you. This is a common practice at many family gatherings. Holiday gatherings, you might set a chair with a candle for those who are missing. Weddings, you may do something similar, knowing and acknowledging publicly that there's someone here, that there's someone not here that should be, that we wish deeply was. In the mystery of our tradition, we practice communion in a mystic sense. This ritual connects us back 2,000 years to a meal that took place at a moment of imminent loss. It is how we remember our greatest teacher, who was taken from us too soon. This ritual has been practiced through time, and many of the people named here today may have even practiced it in their own faith traditions. It might have looked a little different than what we do, but there is a sense that we are all connected through the practicing of this particular kind of meal. So before we move toward communion, we'll do joys and concerns first before we do that. But I'm going to ask you, there are note cards and Sharpies in the basket over here. So before you come to the table, I'm going to invite you to stop by the small table and write a name of who you would like to be taking communion with today. Perhaps it is those names of those really raw losses that we have spent the last amount of time naming. Perhaps it is one of those mentors or friends, those saints that have gone before us that made us who we are. Whoever it is that you want to be connected to, write their name. And as you are coming up to the altar, leave them scattered across its top. This, in its original inception, was a dinner table. It was a place for us to remain connected to God and to one another. And so today, as we observe this festival in our faith tradition, I invite you to invite them to communion, to walk with them as you flow through these familiar steps, trusting in the mystery of God that connects all of us. This is a gentle container for everything we bring to it. Memories and stories and names. And we'll continue to hold each other through lunch, where you'll get more spaciousness and more freedom to name the names, to remember the people, to tell the story. But there is no tidy bow I can tie this up with for you. Grief is an ongoing companionship, sometimes more intense and sometimes less. There's nothing that'll fix it, nothing that will take it away. In fact, you are not broken if you're grieving. You are in touch with life. So we close this time with a melancholy to be continued, because it is what I have to offer, what our tradition has to offer. I will say the names, we'll keep the silence, and we will remember together, promising that you do not have to do this alone, that we do this in community for a reason, to remember. Held in the care of this community and in the presence of God. Amen.